The wind howled through the empty street, slicing through my jacket like a knife. My breath came out in shaky white puffs as I stood on the front porch, rubbing my hands together for warmth. The temperature had dropped drastically since my shift ended, and my entire body was numb from the cold. I banged my fist against the door again, harder this time, ignoring the sharp sting in my knuckles. "Greg," I shouted, my voice barely rising above the wind. "I know you're in there. Open the damn door." No answer. My stomach twisted in frustration. I knew he could hear me. The living room light was on, and I could see the glow of the television flashing through the curtains. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't out. He was just ignoring me. I looked down at my phone, my frozen fingers fumbling as I checked the time. 11:42 p.m. My shift at the grocery store had ended nearly an hour ago, but I had spent the last 30 minutes standing outside my own house, knocking, begging, and pleading for someone, anyone, to let me in. I took a deep breath and knocked again, this time pressing my ear against the door. I listened carefully, hoping to hear movement, a sign that he was finally coming to let me in. Instead, I heard something else. Laughter. Not just any laughter, his laughter. Greg was sitting inside, warm and comfortable, probably with a beer in his hand, laughing at whatever show he was watching. Meanwhile, I was outside, freezing, shivering, my toes going numb inside my worn-out sneakers. Anger boiled inside me, mixing with the cold, burning hotter than anything I had felt in a long time. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. Greg wanted me out here. This wasn't the first time. The first time it happened, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Greg had just forgotten I was coming home late. Maybe he had fallen asleep early. But then it happened again. And again. Once when I came home from a late-night study session. Again when I returned from grocery shopping for my mom. Then another time when I got back from school after missing the bus. Every time I would knock. Every time I would beg. And every time he would wait, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour, before finally letting me in with a smug grin on his face, acting like he had done me a favor. And my mother? She never got involved. The first time I told her, she looked uncomfortable but brushed it off. The second time she told me to try not to upset him. The third time she just sighed and walked away. Now I was alone. I swallowed down the lump in my throat and pulled out my phone. My fingers were so cold I could barely hold it properly as I dialed my mother's number. It rang once, twice, then finally she picked up. "Hello." Her voice was groggy, heavy with sleep. "Mom," I said, my teeth chattering. Greg locked me out again. Silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, the hesitation in her voice before she finally spoke. "Sweetheart, just wait a little while. He'll let you in." I gripped the phone tighter. "A little while. Mom, it's freezing out here." Another pause. Things like, "Try not to make him angry next time, okay?" A sharp pain stabbed through my chest, colder than the wind whipping against my face. Next time. There was going to be a next time. "Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking. "He's doing this on purpose. He wants me out here." Silence. "Mom." Another sigh. "I'll talk to him in the morning, okay? Just be patient, sweetheart." And then she hung up. I stood there staring at my phone, my fingers tightening around it. That was it. That was the moment I knew. My mother wasn't going to save me. So I had to save myself. The next morning I woke up with one thing on my mind. Taking back my home. I had barely slept the night before. After spending hours outside in the cold, I finally gave up and walked to a nearby gas station, where I stayed until sunrise, warming myself with cups of cheap coffee. My body ached, my fingers were still stiff from the cold, and my eyes burned from exhaustion. But beneath all of that there was something else. Something stronger than my fatigue, my frustration, and even my anger. Determination. Greg had been playing this cruel game for too long. Now I was done playing. By the time I made it back home, the sun was rising, casting a dull golden light over the house. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the place that should have been my safe space. But all I felt was resentment. I took a deep breath and walked up the front porch. The door was already unlocked. Of course, now that Greg had gotten his fun, he no longer cared about keeping me out. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warmth of the house hit me immediately, and for a second I just stood there, soaking it in, hating the fact that I had been denied it all night. My stomach twisted with anger as I looked around the familiar living room. The same couch Greg lounged on, the same beer cans scattered around, the same scent of old cigarette smoke clinging to the air. Then I heard him. "You're finally back," Greg's voice drawled from the kitchen. I turned my head just in time to see him walking in, a smug grin plastered across his face. I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. He smirked and leaned against the doorframe, tilting his head as he looked me up and down. "What? No, good morning, Greg. No, thank you for finally letting me in." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "I was locked out all night," I said, my voice cold. "You knew I was out there." His grin widened. And I felt something snap inside me. That was it. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just angry. I was done. I squared my shoulders and met his gaze head-on. "You like locking me out, Greg?" I asked, my voice steady. "You enjoy making me suffer?" His smirk faltered just a little at my sudden confidence. "What's your point, kid?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "My point is," I said, my words slow and deliberate, "it's your turn now." He scoffed. "What the hell does that?" I didn't wait for him to finish. I walked past him, heading straight for my room, my mind already running through everything I needed to do. The first thing I did was check my savings. I wasn't rich, not even close, but I had been saving every extra dollar I could from my part-time job at the grocery store. Between tips and my hourly wages, I had just enough for what I needed. A complete set of new locks for the house. After a quick search, I found a locksmith who could do the job immediately. I hesitated for only a second before calling. "Good morning. How can I help you?" a cheerful voice answered. I took a deep breath. "I need all the locks changed on my house today. As soon as possible." "Sure. Are you the homeowner?" I hesitated, but only for a moment. "Yes," I lied. "I have full permission." They gave me a price, and though it stung to part with the money, I agreed. "Can you do it within the next few hours?" "Absolutely," the locksmith assured me. "We'll send someone over right away." I hung up, my heart pounding. This was it. Greg had always held the power. He had always been the one deciding when I could come inside and when I couldn't. Now it was my turn. By mid-afternoon, the locksmith arrived. A middle-aged man with kind eyes and a toolbox in hand. "Big project, huh?" he said as he worked, replacing the front door lock first. "Yeah," I said, watching carefully as he installed a brand-new deadbolt. "Something like that." He chuckled. "Kicking someone out?" I smiled slightly. "Something like that." By the time he was done, every single lock in the house had been replaced. Front door, back door, even the one on my bedroom. He handed me the keys, all shiny and new. "Here you go. No one's getting in without your say-so now." I nodded, gripping the keys tightly. "That's the idea." After the locksmith left, I sat on the couch, running my fingers over the keys, waiting for the perfect moment. And then it came. Greg left the house around 6 p.m. as he always did, probably heading to the bar to waste the night away. The second the front door shut behind him, I moved. I grabbed my bag, threw in the essentials, and locked the door behind me. Then I waited. By the time Greg returned, it was nearly midnight. I watched from my bedroom window as he stumbled up the porch, his usual drunken sway making him slower than usual. He fumbled for his keys, muttering under his breath, then paused. I knew the exact moment he realized, because that's when the banging started. Bang, bang, bang. "Hey," he yelled, his voice slurring. "What the hell?" I smiled, leaning back against my pillows as I listened to him struggle. "Karma's a bitch, isn't it, Greg? Open the damn door," he shouted, his fists slamming against the wood. "I know you're in there, you little brat." I reached for my phone and turned up the volume, drowning him out with my favorite music. "Let me in." His voice was growing more desperate. "Come on, kid, this isn't funny." I laughed softly to myself. Oh, but it is. For once he was the one in the cold. For once he was the one begging to be let in. For once he knew exactly how it felt. And I was warm. Safe. Comfortable. I stretched out on my bed, closed my eyes, and sighed. This was the best night of sleep I'd had in years. The next morning I woke up feeling better than ever. Sunlight streamed through my window, birds were chirping outside, and most importantly, Greg was still locked out. I stretched, yawning as I glanced at my phone. 9:12 a.m. I swung my legs out of bed and padded toward the front door. Peeking through the peephole, I spotted Greg curled up on the porch, shivering in the cold morning air. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale, and his lips were pressed together in a thin, miserable line. For a moment I just watched him. It was surreal, seeing him like this. The man who had tormented me for years, reduced to this. Weak. Vulnerable. Helpless. Just like he had always made me feel. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Now you know, Greg. Now you finally understand. I let him suffer a little longer. I went to the kitchen, made myself a hot cup of coffee and sat at the table enjoying the warmth of my home. I even made breakfast, eggs and toast, the smell wafting through the house. I knew he could smell it. I knew his stomach must have been growling. And for once I had the power to ignore him. But eventually I had to face him. I walked back to the door and slowly unlocked it. Greg didn't react at first. His eyes were closed, his body curled into itself like a child seeking comfort. For a second I thought he might actually be asleep. But then his eyes fluttered open, and the second he saw me they burned with fury. "You little," he started, but his voice was hoarse, his body trembling. I raised an eyebrow. "What, Greg? You cold?" He pushed himself up on shaky legs, rubbing his arms. "You think this is funny?" he growled. I tilted my head. "Yeah. I do." He scowled. "You locked me out all night." I crossed my arms. "And how many times have you done that to me, Greg? How many nights have I had to spend outside, freezing, begging to come in? Where was your sympathy then?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He knew I was right. I let the silence stretch. Then I took a deep breath and leaned against the doorframe. "So, Greg, here's how this is gonna work. I'm in charge now." He blinked. "What?" "You heard me. The locks. They're changed. You don't live here anymore." He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, kid. You really think you can just kick me out?" I smiled. "I already did." He clenched his fists. "That's illegal. You can't just." "Actually, I cut him off. I can. Because this house. It doesn't belong to you." His face twisted in confusion. "What the hell are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and held it up. "I had a little chat with Mom's lawyer." His eyes darkened. "You what? You know how Mom left this house to me in her will?" I asked, watching his expression shift. "And you know how you kept telling me I had no rights here? Well, turns out I do." The color drained from his face. Greg's face twisted with rage. "You're lying." I smirked, holding up my phone. "Want to see the paperwork?" He didn't answer, but I could see the panic creeping into his eyes. "You've been living here illegally this whole time," I continued. "Mom's will left everything to me. The house. The furniture. Even the damn TV you sit on your lazy ass watching all day. And since you never bothered to put your name on the lease, guess what? You don't own a damn thing here." His mouth opened and closed. He looked stunned. "And," I added, enjoying the moment, "I also asked the lawyer how to legally evict you. Turns out, since you never signed a lease, I don't have to evict you. I can just kick you out." Greg's face turned red, veins popping in his neck. He looked ready to explode, but he was stuck. He had nothing. "You little," he started, his fists clenching. I held up a hand. Careful, Greg. The second you threaten me, I call the cops." His jaw locked so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He wanted to fight back, to lash out. But he knew I had him backed into a corner. Finally, he let out a harsh breath. "Fine," he spat. "You win, you little brat. But don't think for a second that this is over." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I hope it isn't, Greg. Because if you ever come back here again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." I saw the moment the truth hit him. He had lost. For the first time in years, Greg had no power over me. I didn't even give him time to respond. I stepped back and slammed the door in his face. Then for good measure I locked it. The second the lock clicked into place, I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. It was over. I had spent years feeling powerless. Feeling trapped. Feeling like I would never escape. But now this house was mine. My space. My home. For the first time since my mother passed, I felt safe. And as I stood there listening to the sound of Greg's angry footsteps fading away down the street, I smiled to myself. He had spent so many years making me suffer. But in the end, I had won. But Greg wasn't done. I knew better than to think he'd just walk away. The man was like a cockroach, hard to kill and impossible to get rid of without a fight. For the next few days I kept my guard up. I double-checked the locks before bed, installed security cameras outside, and kept my phone close. I half expected Greg to come back and try something. But the night passed in silence. Then on the third morning I woke up to find my car completely destroyed. The tires were slashed. The windows were shattered. And spray painted across the hood in ugly red letters were 3 words. "Payback's a bitch." My stomach dropped. Greg. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I refused to let him win. I took photos of the damage from every angle and emailed them to my lawyer. Then I called a towing company to remove the wreckage. I would figure out the next steps later. Right now my focus was on making sure Greg paid for what he did. The cops said they would investigate, but I knew better than to rely on them. I had to be smarter. And I knew exactly how to do that. Greg had another weakness: his reputation. He loved playing the charming, easygoing guy to everyone outside our home. Neighbors, old friends, coworkers. Anyone who didn't know him well thought he was just a regular, hardworking man. If I wanted to get to him, I had to tear down that image. I started by talking to our neighbors. "Hey, Mrs. Collins," I said to the elderly woman who lived next door. "Did you see anyone hanging around my car the other night?" She frowned. "No, but I did hear a commotion late at night." I looked out my window and saw Greg walking down the street. Bingo. "And you'd be willing to tell the police that?" "Of course, dear," she said, patting my hand. "That man always gave me a bad feeling." That was one piece of the puzzle. Next I took things online. I posted a long, detailed thread about everything Greg had done to me. Locking me out of my own home for years. Destroying my mother's car. Trying to manipulate the police into forcing his way back in. I attached screenshots, legal documents, and security footage. People ate it up. Greg's coworkers saw it. Old friends saw it. Even distant relatives who had once thought I was exaggerating saw it. The support poured in. Messages from people saying they believed me, neighbors offering to help, even strangers reaching out with advice on legal action. Then came the best part. Greg's boss saw the thread. And he was furious. A few days later I got a call from an unknown number. "Hello. You little bitch." Greg's voice roared through the phone. I smirked. "Here we go. You think this is funny?" He spat. "I just lost my damn job because of you." I leaned back against the couch. "Oh. What happened?" "Don't play dumb. You ruined me." I had heard through the grapevine that Greg's company had a strict policy against harassment and abuse. Once they saw the thread, they started digging. And what do you know? Greg had a history of anger issues at work too. It didn't take long for them to fire him. Greg was unraveling and I loved it. "You did this on purpose," he growled. I shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe you did this to yourself." He let out a string of curses, but I stayed quiet, letting him burn himself out. Then I dropped the final bomb. "Oh, by the way," I said, "I filed a restraining order against you this morning." The silence on the other end was delicious. "You can't." "I can." And I did. "You come near me again and you're going to jail." Greg let out a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a whimper. "You'll regret this," he muttered. But for the first time in my life I didn't feel afraid. I felt free. Greg was losing control and he knew it. I could hear it in his voice. I could see it in the desperate, rage-fueled texts he kept sending, each one more unhinged than the last. But the thing was, Greg didn't scare me anymore. Not now. Not after everything I had done to him. For once in my life I had the power. And he was powerless. The restraining order was approved within days. It was almost too easy. Between the police reports, the documented evidence of harassment, and my neighbor's witness statements, the judge barely hesitated before signing the paperwork. Greg was officially banned from coming anywhere near me or the house. And if he did, straight to jail. I didn't think he'd be dumb enough to violate it, but I underestimated how desperate he had become. Because 1 week later he showed up at my front door. It was late, past midnight when I heard it. A soft tapping at first. Then a low scratching noise. Then finally, a sharp bang. 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 "Mia." My heart leaped into my throat. "Greg. I know you're in there." His voice was muffled but furious. "Open the damn door." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Then without hesitation I grabbed my phone and called the police. 911, "What's your emergency?" My stepfather is trying to break into my house, I said, my voice steady. I have a restraining order against him. That was all they needed to hear. Officers are on their way. Stay inside and don't engage. I hung up and waited. Greg was still yelling, still banging on the door, but he had no idea what was coming. Because this time, I wasn't alone. The red and blue lights flashed through my window just 10 minutes later. I peered through the blinds just in time to see Greg freeze. The moment he realized what was happening, he tried to run. Too late. The officers were on him in seconds, grabbing his arms, pinning him down as he shouted every curse in the book. Let me go, you bastards. This is my house. She's lying. This is a setup. I opened the door just in time to see them shove him into the back of the police car. His wild, bloodshot eyes locked onto mine. You little... femme. The door shut in his face. I let out a slow breath. It was over. Really truly over. Greg was charged with trespassing and violating a restraining order. He tried to argue his case in court, tried to paint himself as the victim, tried to say I had manipulated the system against him. But the judge didn't buy a word of it. Greg was sentenced to 6 months in jail with an additional 3 years of probation. And when he finally got out, he wasn't allowed anywhere near me. I never saw him again. And I never wanted to. The first morning without Greg in my life, I woke up feeling lighter. Like a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. I stepped outside, took a deep breath, and smiled. The house was mine now. And for the first time in years, I was truly free.